Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ahmed Rashid, and I will be in conversation with Ambassador Lakhdar Brahimi. Uh, Ambassador Brahimi is an Algerian-born UN diplomat who served as the UN and Arab League Special Envoy to Syria until 2014. He was Minister of Foreign Affairs of Algeria from 91 to 93, and in 1989 he negotiated a ceasefire in the Lebanese civil war and attempted to establish a roadmap to revive Lebanon. But most importantly, he has led the UN mission in Afghanistan twice. And the second time was after the 9/11 attacks, when he concluded the Bonn Agreement that ended the war in Afghanistan and established an interim government. He was then tasked with bringing peace to the country. He has carried out important work at the UN, including the report on UN peace operations, which is still called the Brahimi Report. He is also a member of the Elders, a group of world leaders working for global peace, and a member of the Commission on Legal Empowerment of the Poor, the first global initiative to focus specifically on the link between poverty and law. I have known Ambassador Brahimi for more than 25 years and learned a great deal from him about the art of diplomacy. He's been one of the most important mentors in my life, so I'm doubly proud that we have him here today. Welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. I'm delighted to see you from afar again. You know, I am one of your faithful readers and admirers, and I have been
that's very kind. That's very kind. So let's kick off. You're best remembered for your remarkable ability to bring peace to Afghanistan in 2011, after 2 decades of war. What did you learn doing that? How did you mediate between so many warring factions, which is something very relevant today as the talks continue?
You mean in Lebanon?
No, I'm talking about Afghanistan in 9/11, after 9/11.
In 9/11, all right, yeah. Well, you know, when I was first asked by Kofi to go to Afghanistan in 1997, I told him no, because I knew extremely little about the country. And if you remember, you were one of the few people that I turned to tell me a little bit what Afghanistan was and what we could do. But in 2001, I have had 2 years in the late 90s in Afghanistan. So I was prepared. I was asked to first organize and lead the conference in Bonn, where we managed to get the Bonn Agreement. That was the roadmap on which we worked from 2001 to 2004. I think it's important to note that you know, we assembled in Bonn 35 people, just 35 Afghan leaders. Naturally, the Taliban were not there because they had just been routed by the American military intervention. And I mean, the Americans would have jumped to the sky if we had even suggested that the Taliban be invited. And the Taliban would not have come to a conference by the United Nations, where the most important member was the United States, which had thousands and thousands of troops in Afghanistan. They wouldn't have come. But anyway, we had 35 people. And when we finished, I told them respectfully, you are not representative enough of the rich variety of the people of Afghanistan. But I think the text we have prepared, the Bonn Agreement, is not bad. So if we all go back and we know how to reach out, we succeed in reaching out to everybody else, then I think that you will people will forget that the people who wrote this document were not representative. But if you don't reach out, people will say, well, of course, this Bonn agreement is useless because the people who prepared it are not representative. So I think this was a good beginning. The other thing is that we enjoyed support from everybody. Pakistan, Iran, India, Russia, China, other neighbors of Afghanistan, countries from further away, like Saudi Arabia or Turkey. So we enjoyed that support at the beginning. So nobody was shooting at us, as it were, as it had been before and happened later. But there, in end of 2001, early 2002, we had the support of everyone, and that helped a little bit.
Were you very conscious of the fact that the Taliban had been left out? And the fact is that it also, of course, encouraged them to relaunch the insurgency 2 years down the road in 2013. Do you think you could have prevented that if they had taken part in the conference?
Very, very, very much so, Ahmed. I think I was very much aware of the fact that the Taliban were not there. You see, these people controlled 95% of the territory. Ahmed Shah Massoud was the only one still hanging on to Panjshir in the northeast. Everything else was under control. Yeah, they have been routed and expelled by American military intervention out of the big cities. And I think I was asking, where are they? Quite a few have been killed. Quite a few have been arrested. But their bureaucracy and military, I think, counted more than 200,000 people. Where have they gone? I think we didn't stop to ask that question, or rather we did. And now I recognize that I was too timid asking that question. I was too timid because there was unanimity. The people who were in Bonn were unanimous. Taliban are finished, so forget about them. But then also, India, Iran, Russia, the United States, European countries all said, forget about the Taliban, they are finished, they don't exist anymore. That was a terrible, terrible mistake. Looking, with a little more we know now, I think if we had, reached out to them, not all, but quite a few, including in the leadership, would have at least engaged in a conversation with the other Afghans. And it would have been very much different from talking to them now that they have, persistently for the last 20 years, and they control, what I hear is that they control something like half of the country already. So that was a terrible failure that we were all responsible for. You remember Wakil Ahmed Mutawakkil. He surrendered to the Americans. And what I hear is that the Americans, during negotiations before he surrendered, was that, look, we'll keep you a couple of months to debrief you, and so on, and then you will be free. They kept him 2 years. I think if the other Taliban leaders have seen that the Americans have kept their word and indeed released Wakil Ahmed Mutawakkil after 2 months, they would probably have been interested in doing the same. But of course, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 1 year passed, and Wakil Ahmed Mutawakkil was still detained by the Americans. So, who would then, in the Taliban leadership, as any level, I'm not talking about Muhammad Omar or people around him, even the governor or the district governor would not consider talking to the Americans or to us. So you see, this is terrible. Now, may I go on for a minute?
Yeah, please.
I hear now, I have never heard that before, and definitely not when I was in Kabul in 2002 and 2003, that President Karzai had received a letter from leaders of the Taliban suggesting to open some kind of discussion with the interim government that Karzai was the leader of. President Karzai never told me anything about that. And I very much regret that, because I would have been less timid had I known this in trying to reach out to the Taliban or encouraging others to do the same. But I heard this. I haven't had a chance to ask President Karzai for confirmation. But if it is true, it's a great pity that we didn't follow that up.
I heard the same thing, and I think a lot of senior Taliban did approach the Karzai government for an amnesty and for a dialogue. But somehow Karzai did not make this public to anyone at all. He was scared that the Americans would react very negatively, and that's why he kept it to himself. But let's get on to the present peace process, which by many accounts has become paralyzed. It's been going on for at least since February, and certainly since September. We've been stuck on this failure of the two sides, the Afghan government and the Taliban, to agree on how to progress forward now on setting up a joint government or a coalition government. Now, just 2 days ago, after months of silence, the Taliban and Afghan government have agreed to principles of procedure, whatever that may mean, and now will tackle building an agenda for future talks. Well, how do you see this process, these talks that have been going on and frankly have not yielded very much? Have there been mistakes made by both sides in these talks? How do you compare them to your own experience?
I have to be very careful here, because I'm very far from the scene. I know only what a couple of friends tell me from time to time, and what I read in the media. So, I think people who are listening to us must keep that in mind. When a conflict like this that has been going on for a very, very long time, then people somehow agree to talk to one another. That happens in a variety of situations and ways. Sometimes, the parties to the conflict realize that we can't win, cannot win straight victory, and we are willing to listen to the other side and see if we can work out a compromise. Negotiations between, or helping parties in this frame of mind to negotiate is the best possible situation. You have also sometimes people who say, okay, our people have suffered a lot and so on, but we can win. Now, if you tell us that through these negotiations, we can achieve most of our objectives, even if not all, but definitely most, then perhaps we can discuss. When both sides are in that frame of mind, that they are willing, they are going to win. Yeah. And of course, it will take a little bit longer, but we will win. When both sides are in that frame of mind, then it's extremely difficult. And I think this is, I mean, from the little I know, and tell me if I'm wrong, this is the frame of mind in which the both sides, the government and the Taliban are. They think that they can win. The Taliban think that they have already, taken control of half of the country. They will do the same. And the government, say now they are established, they have an army, they have an air force, they have the support of quite a few people, most of their neighbors, if not all, the US, Europe, they can win. So when you bring people like, in this frame of mind together, it is bound to be difficult because each one is pursuing total victory or at least making a minimum of concessions to the other side. You cannot possibly go very far if each side think that the other side is losing, but we are willing to give them some crumbs. Then you don't. It's bound to be difficult. Still, looking, being interested in Afghanistan the way you and I are, without having any interest, it is. I hope you agree with me that this is something worth pursuing, and it is worth supporting, pushing, helping the two sides to go on talking that they will ultimately come to an agreement that is acceptable to both sides.
Right. Yeah, I fear very much that the trying to create an agenda for talks will get bogged down very quickly over such big issues as a ceasefire, which the government is demanding, but the Taliban are so far refusing to give. So we have to see on that front. Let me ask you, if you look at this historically, there seems to be a blockage over the two conflicting views of a future Afghan state, one ruled by Sharia and the other by a constitution. Now, you were, played a leading role in building up elections, a constitution, a lawyer jirga, etc. in your time after 9/11 in Afghanistan. How do we convince the Taliban that something more is needed than just the Sharia to create a nation state which is at peace with itself?
Of course, I don't know in what frame of mind the Taliban negotiators and those who are behind them as their leaders or their supporters are. If they just want to re-establish what they used to call the Emirates, the Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan, then I think they and everybody else is in trouble. Compromise means that you accept less, indeed much less, than your proclaimed objective. And for that, I think you need to see, in the case of Afghanistan, you need to see how can the government, between people, as you say, who want the Sharia and people who want a constitution and a secular state, how can they can they work together, live together, run a government together? You've got to be willing to take a look and accept, you see, for the government, for example, to accept, yeah, okay, you know, people who believe that Sharia has to be the only source of law. I mean, you know, yeah, we are willing to associate with them in the government. And also for the Taliban, say, yeah, people who don't think that their wives should wear hijab, who think that their daughters can go to university, are also Afghans like us, and we have to respect their choice and live with them and govern with them. This is what needs to, you know, if I think, these are the kind of discussions we had in Bonn and in the Loya Jirga, the two Loya Jirgas we held in Afghanistan, 2001, 2002, 2003. These are the discussions we had. Yes, you have, you know, a strong belief that, you know, you need a secular state and nothing else. But a lot of your people believe differently. You've got to live with them. And to the Sharia, you know, those who want Sharia, the discussion is that, you know, at least half of your country, probably more, don't want Sharia as the only source of law. What are you going to do with them? You've got to live with them. I think, you know, I don't know how they are going to structure their negotiations, but I think this is the first thing that needs to be. I think each side has got to say, yeah, all right, I'm going really to listen seriously to the other side, and if to see if we can really, he believing in Sharia, I believing in a secular state, can govern together. And perhaps we should start and try to govern together. You know, my personal dream, again, looking from outside, and perhaps I'm saying nonsense. What I'm saying is total nonsense, considering where the situation is now. I say, okay, let's form a government and start.
So you're suggesting we form a government first and discuss all the complicated issues in the second phase of this.
You know, you cannot possibly, you know, begin with any hope of succeeding. You know, writing down an agreement between people who think that, you know, only the Quran is our constitution, and right. People who say, you know, Quran, it's great, it's our religion, we pray with you and observe a lot of things that cannot be base of the state. I don't know how are you going to bridge that gap. You bridge that gap by saying, you know, lakum dinukum waliya din. You have your belief, I have my belief. Or, you know, as a leader in Egypt said in the 1920s, الدين لله والوطن للجميع. Religion is for God, and the land, the fatherland is for everybody. I mean, in the case that, you know, there were Christians, there were Muslims, you know, we respect each other's belief, but Egypt is our common country. In Afghanistan also, you know, you have people who believe that, you know, we don't need anything else apart from the Quran. And people who say, no, Quran is, I say that, you know, let's express full respect to one another, because we are going to live together for a long time. Afghanistan is our country, and the country of our children, grandchildren, and so on. And it's not going to change. Don't try to impose your views, and see if we can live together and work together. That's why, you know, very pragmatic. And then let's start and see, you know, if we can live, you know, in a country where, you know, girls go to university, some with a scarf and some without a scarf. Is that acceptable? Can we live? Can we live with that? My feeling is that yes, we can, and that if they start working together, they will discover that they can live together.
What you say is very interesting, because I'll just make the point that I think what the mediators are pursuing at the moment is a step-by-step approach to have, you know, let's get this issue resolved, let's get that issue resolved, and then and that is where the bog down is coming. And what you're suggesting is that a government should be formed and everything should be run through the process of governing, and these very contentious issues. Is there a way that you can tackle the very deep ethnic and sectarian divide in the country through the same method of what you're suggesting? By just sitting together? Do you think the ethnic and sectarian parties can sit together and govern and work out their conflict?
You know, Ahmed, I'm sitting in the comfort of my home, thousands of kilometers from Afghanistan. The last time I went there is 2010, and only for 3 days. So, you know, I'm talking on the top of my head. The little I know, the little I remember about Afghanistan is that, you know, there used to be a lot of tolerance. Islam in Afghanistan did not come, you know, it was not brought to Afghanistan by the Taliban. This is what I used to tell them about Bamiyan. Bamiyan has been there for 1,000, you know, you've been there for 1,200 or 300,000 years. And the people who governed Afghanistan before you were as good Muslims as you, or perhaps even better Muslims than you. Why you have this idea of now destroying? So I'm saying the same thing here. Afghanistan know what tolerance is. They have had Shia for a long time. They have had Sunnis for a long time. You know, and also, you know, the tribal governments, tribal countries. They know how to quarrel. They know how to make peace. This is what I saw, you know, in lots of places, particularly in Yemen, if they are allowed to. So, yeah, why don't you talk, you know, rather than, you know, bring in, you know, great ulamas and great professors of law, why don't you talk, you, the people who are going to live together? Why don't you talk, say, you know, how can we live together? I mean, this is the approach. I'm not suggesting that, you know, say, forget about everything else and form a government. But I think this is what you will end up to. That, you know, we still disagree. I don't think you can convince every Taliban that forget about Quran as the only source of Sharia. Nor are you going to convince a secularist that, yeah, you know, accept the Sharia and forget about the rest. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in Doha. It's not going to happen after Doha. So the question is, the question that we should discuss is how, you know, we recognize our differences. Now let's see how we can live and work together. I think this is much better than the. Yeah, you know, maybe I'm totally wrong. I'm saying that's nonsense.
You're being very modest as usual. Let's move on. Can the neighbors play a more positive role in bringing peace? And particularly, I'm thinking of the countries with the most influence, Pakistan and Iran. Otherwise, of course, Afghanistan has 6 neighbors, and all of them are hugely important: China, Russia, Central Asian states. But what can the neighbors do, which so far they're not doing, which could really help the peace process?
Again, if you go around the world and see places where intractable conflicts have taken place or are still taking place, the neighbors in general and others who can be either great facilitator or they can also be spoilers. The same countries. They have 2 hats. So it depends which hat they want to put on, that of a spoiler or that of a facilitator. I think that if, again, let's just imagine the dream of Pakistan and Iran get together and say, let's go and help the Afghans end their wars. That would be much more important than what the rest of the world put together say or do about Afghanistan. And then you are certain that the negotiation in Doha will be a success. And that, I think, is something that, the so-called international community, whether it's the Americans, the Russians, should also keep in mind and work on. Everybody should go to Tehran and Pakistan and say, come on, you two get together and go and speak the same language to all the Afghan parties, not only to 1 or 2 parties. So yeah, definitely the neighbors can be horrible spoilers. In fact, they can, and they have done so, prevent any peace from taking place. But they can also be hugely effective in supporting peace in Afghanistan.
Right. Well, the neighbors seem to be in 2 minds. For example, last year we had a genuine effort by China to become to mediate between the Taliban and the government. The Chinese seem to have dropped out now. The Russians keep promising that they are ready to mediate, and of course the Americans have done the rounds with the neighboring states, except for Iran. But we haven't really created a unified bloc or of the neighboring countries, which could actually put pressure on the Taliban and the government to come to an agreement.
China, in our time, in 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, had an extremely low profile. I used to talk to them. I went to Beijing. I talked to their ambassador there, but they were politely listening. And then, they ultimately sent 1 colonel as an observer. I'm not sure whether we were paying him at Yunama or not. That was the limit of their interest in what was happening. But now China is a big player on the world scene. They have taken on that role, and they are exercising it. They cannot possibly ignore or look, refuse to look at what is happening in Afghanistan. What's happening in Afghanistan concerns them. We will not talk about the Uyghur, who are their neighbors, the direct neighbor of Afghanistan. So they are interested. They must be interested. How do they express that interest? I'm too far away to know.
How do you see India's position, and particularly, the ongoing tension between India and Pakistan, which perhaps has limited Pakistan's ability to really help the peace process because it is obsessed with Indian actions in Afghanistan?
There again, I haven't been in India for a very long time. Like practically everybody else, I see with a great deal of sadness and anger at what Prime Minister Modi is doing in India. In Afghanistan, I used to call countries like India and Saudi Arabia near neighbors. They may not have borders with Afghanistan, but they are close enough to be considered as neighbors. India has played a very, very important role after Bonn. They spent a lot of money. They supported. They gave a lot of economic and technical support, but unfortunately, it was all done with an eye on Pakistan. Just like Pakistan seemed to be, incapable of, doing anything, saying anything about Afghanistan without thinking about India. How are you going to diminish the bad effects of that reality? It's a reality that India and Pakistan see the rest of the world, not only Afghanistan, only in relation to the other side. How can you try to protect Afghanistan from this? I think that is the job of other countries, the United States, Russia, China, who all have relations and influence in both Pakistan and India.
Let's briefly turn to American policy. President Trump is still threatening to withdraw all American forces before he leaves office in January. What do you think Joe Biden should be thinking of doing? I think there's a deep division in the U.S. establishment right now about those who want to keep a small presence of American forces and those who want a complete pullout. And this leaves Biden in a very difficult position.
That again, I have no idea whatsoever of what the thinking is in Washington. I know what Trump is doing. Trump is not, doesn't care one way or another what happens to Afghanistan. He cares, he's collecting a lot of money for after he leaves on the 20th of January. So that's all he's thinking of. Doesn't care about Afghanistan whatsoever. So I think we should forget about what Trump says or does. Even if he pulls out troops, there are very few anyway. They can return on the 21st of January, if that is what the American government, which is the Joe Biden government, will want to do. Again, since we are just having a chat, let me remind you of something I said in 1999. When you remember, we were together, as a matter of fact, in Pakistan, when I decided that I give up. I went back to New York and I spoke to the Security Council. And I told them, look, I have, in 2 years, I have tried everything I know and got nowhere. So I think I have no option but to go away, to leave. But why have I failed the way I have? It's because you sent me to Afghanistan, but you have no interest in Afghanistan. You don't care what happens to them. It's a faraway country, poor. So if they want to kill one another, I mean, let them do it. That is your position, and that is why I cannot be any more your representative. But I added, this is not verbatim, but it is exactly the meaning of what I said. You are totally wrong. Afghanistan is a very poor country. It's a very far country. They can go on killing one another for a long time. But one day it will explode in your face. Even from this very far away country, one day you will regret your position. And this is what happened in 2001, exactly 2 years later. And that is why they called me back. So, again, yeah, of course, the Americans can leave now. There are few thousand troops. It will do nothing to them, if they decide in January to leave. It will do nothing to them in January or February or March. But one day, their friends, their allies, may feel the consequences of such a rash decision. I don't know what they're going to do. I think that President Biden and also the team he has chosen seem to be very responsible, very experienced people, and I'm sure they will. I hope that they will take the right decision.
Right. Let me ask you a couple of questions about Iran and the region. I mean, the murder of the Iranian nuclear scientist has highlighted the instability in our region in particular. Where does Iran and the US go from here? Are we heading towards a regional war, some kind of real explosive explosion that can lead to a conflict before President Trump leaves office? There is this very big fear around the world at the moment. This is really the hottest region of all. What do you think is happening? Why are we entering into this terrible state of instability?
There again, let's look back a little bit. When the Americans invaded Iraq in 2003, knowingly or unknowingly, they got rid of Saddam Hussein, who was a thorn in the flesh for Afghanistan, for Iran. So they have helped him a great deal. They helped Iran a great deal by getting rid of Afghanistan. But knowingly or unknowingly, the people whom they helped put in power, they were Shia. They were not only Shia, they were the closest Shia in Iraq to Iran. You see, so not only they have eliminated the enemy of Iran at the head of the Iraqi state, they have given that state to the people who were closest to Iran. This is a huge change in the region. It's a very, very big change in the region. Iran is, again, Iran used to say, we are an important country in this region. 5,000 years of history, 100 million people, oil, and so on, civilization. We deserve to be treated as such. After the invasion of Iraq, They said, no, 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 we are not an important country in the region. We are the most important country in the region. And we have got to be treated that way. And then the Americans and also countries in the region woke up and said, I mean, please, let's go back to the situation that existed before. You know, that's not how history works. We don't go back. You've got now to deal with the situation where Iran is now the most important, the most influential country in the region. Is Iran doing everything right? Definitely not. I think they are abusing their position. They used to complain quite rightly that they did not enjoy enough respect, but now they are really overdoing it. They are trying to impose their influence, if not their domination, on the region. And of course, the region does not accept that, not even Iraq. So they have huge influence, and they say so themselves publicly in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen. That's quite a lot. But there again, it depends how you exercise that influence. You can exercise that influence by helping the country stabilize, your friends live together with the others, or you want to give everything to your friends. So the people who complain that Iran is a menace have got have something to say, but also to try to ignore the reality that Iran does not exist, should not exist. That's not going to happen either. A lot of people are talking about, something like the Middle Ages negotiations in Westphalia to end the religious wars in Europe, and that the countries in the region should get together and patiently work out some kind of entente, understanding how we can respect one another, live as good neighbors. Perhaps that's a minimum. Perhaps also cooperate, economically, culturally, and so on. Countries like Turkey and Pakistan, who are not directly involved in the conflict between Iran and its Arab neighbors, could do a little bit more than they do for this. Because if there is some kind of regional conference, or like the OSCE, the Europeans, it has taken them years, but they put together a system where they could discuss economy, culture, how to live together. I think that perhaps we can do the same.
Well, Iran has been ignored by the Americans in helping find a solution to an Afghan peace. But that was not the case after 9/11, when I remember the Iranians were very helpful to you in putting together the Bonn Agreement. Do you think the Iranians can be helpful again in Afghanistan?
Absolutely, absolutely. And from the little I know that Khalilzad has got permission even from the government to talk to the Iranians if they wanted to. And there are some contacts, even if not of the same kind that existed in Bonn. But I know that Khalilzad is authorized to talk to the Afghans.
Right. Let me just move on to one other topic. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states are putting enormous pressure on their Muslim allies to recognize Israel. Is that helpful when there is still no resolution of the Palestinian rights for a homeland? And the man in the street does not understand why this is happening now.
Well, I'm like the man in the street. You know, I think, again, I think that Trump and his husband of his daughter are working for Israel for different reasons. Trump, again, he doesn't care about what happens to the Israelis or the Palestinians. He thinks only of the religious extreme right who vote for him, and they have voted for him. And as he thinks that he has a life after 20th of January, he is still courting that part of the population. His son-in-law is ideologically committed to Israel. So whereas Trump is pursuing his personal interest, his son-in-law is pursuing ideological Zionist objective. They are the people who are putting extreme pressure on everybody. On everybody they talk to about it. And Pompeo, he said recently that the policy pursued by Trump is the policy ordered by God. So what can you do? If you have God against you. I think that the Israelis will not give anything to anybody. They think that there again that they are the chosen people, and that you and I and everybody else and the people in the Gulf and everybody else, we owe it to ourselves to support them. And I'm sure that the countries in the Gulf will realize that sooner or later. There will be, from January on, there will be less pressure from the American government. The American government is not going to ask them to break relations they are establishing with Israel, but they are not going to pressure. They're not going to go to Pakistan or to Algeria and say you have got to establish relations with Israel the way that Mr. Trump and his son-in-law are doing now. I agree with you. I've been close to the Palestinians for the last 50 or 60 years. They are, the last victims of the colonial order that existed in the 19th and the first half century, 20th century. What I believe, what I say always, I said this to the Security Council a couple of years ago when I was invited, spoke to them on behalf of the elders. The Palestinians have rights. Those rights are not going to go away. They still have them. Even if they are deprived of all of them, they still have this right. And they have the right to fight for their rights. And you and I have, in my opinion, have the obligation to support them in their struggle for their rights. Besides, Israel has now established apartheid in Israel and over the Palestinians. And I think I fought against apartheid, from the days I was a student until, Obama became president. And I was there when he was made president. So just as I supported the South Africans, I support the Palestinians with the same vigor.
And what do you think the Palestinians can do right now to preserve their identity and remain a factor?
They resist by just saying no. This is again, to add insult to injury. Jared Kushner and his father-in-law told them, come and we'll give you money. They said, no, we not only we don't get your money, take your money, we will not come, we will not talk to you. So they are resisting in the manner that they can at this moment. And what they can do is just by saying no. They have 2 or 3 terrible problems the leadership is responsible for. One is disunity. They are disunited. That is really a shame, and it's unacceptable. The other thing is that both in the West Bank and in Gaza, there is too much corruption. And that is also a shame. That's also shameful for everybody who is involved in it, and for the leadership for not doing enough to fight corruption and also to establish unity. So it's not a rosy picture, but the Palestinians, as I told you, have rights. Even if they forget about them tomorrow, they will still have those rights. Right. And they have every right to fight for their rights.
We're almost coming to an end, but there's one question I want to ask you, especially given your role at the United Nations. There have been 2 successful peace efforts in Afghanistan. The withdrawal of the Soviet troops in 1989, when in Geneva, where the UN representative Diego Cordovez played a major role in bringing that about. And I spent 6 weeks in Geneva at that time, and I was really impressed with the UN. And the second opportunity in our part of the world has been obviously the 9/11, post 9/11 negotiations and the formation of a new Afghan government. Now, in the present negotiations, the UN doesn't seem to be present. And why, I mean, the Americans are one interlocutor when actually they are a belligerent in the conflict. They're one side of the conflict, and they're also one side of the peacemakers. Why has the UN really not been playing a role in the last 10 years or so in Afghanistan?
There again, I can't really discuss that in any meaningful manner, except to say that in the last 4 years, the UN has been handicapped, not only in Afghanistan, but in lots of other places, because of the position of Trump, who has no time for the UN, doesn't want to hear about the UN, doesn't want to work with them or even allow them to appear. Again, my guess is that President Biden and his team will discover in January that the UN can play an important role and help Afghanistan and help the United States. But that is just my wild guess at this stage. So hopefully the UN will return next year or next month.
I hope so too. I hope the UN does play a role, because it is a neutral role. And even now in Afghanistan, there's enormous respect and love for the UN, for what it has done. And we shouldn't forget also the UN agencies who are providing food and education and all sorts of other benefits to the Afghan population. Well, Ambassador Brahimi, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful talk. I'm very sorry we have not had time for questions, simply because there were so many questions I wanted to ask you that I had no time for anything else. But
And on and on with my answers. I'm sorry if I have been too long, but it has been, it's a pleasure and a privilege to talk to you even from a distance about the country we both care about very much.
right.
So let's just hope the best for Afghanistan.
Thank you very much. And I'll
Sure.
end here. Thank you all for listening and for coming in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed.